Evening. Let's cultivate our motivation. So here we are once again, able to share the Dharma together. And we probably came here just because it's Friday evening and that's what you do. So kind of on automatic. So it's a good kind of automatic that we come to the Dharma automatically. But it would be even better if we remembered our motivation before we came and really thought, wow, I get to listen to the Buddha's teachings again. And what a rare opportunity this is in all of samsara. And so I want to go and be attentive, not like the upside down pot that doesn't let anything in, or the leaky pot that can't retain it, or the dirty pot that listens with the wrong motivation. But to really prepare our mind and look forward to and really think of the fortune we have before coming to the teachings. So that will really wake us up and help us to focus, as well as to create our own good motivation. So think of your long-distance aim of being of the greatest benefit to all beings, and generate that. So we've been discussing the second truth, the truth of the origin of dukkha. And within that, going through the 6 root afflictions. And so we've talked about attachment, anger, ignorance, arrogance, and doubt. And now we're on the 6th one, afflictive views. And that one in turn has 5 branches. The first one of that was view of a personal identity, which we talked about last week. And that one is the from the perspective of the upper tenet systems, that and ignorance together, they're like, not totally twins, not identical twins, fraternal twins, okay? So they're very good buddies, and they're the source of our whole predicament in samsara. It's, the 2 of them together are the source of our whole predicament in samsara. So ignorance in general includes, from the Madhyamaka view, grasping at persons and grasping at phenomena as truly existent, and view of the personal identity refers to grasping our own I as truly existent. So it's much narrower. It focuses, its object is the mere I, not all the various phenomena in the universe. Okay, so we talked about that last week, and we talked about like the 20 wrong views that go along with it, which are very interesting to think about and think, well, how do I see the I? How do I see the self? Yeah, because in samsara, in general, people never ask that question. They just live the I. The I is, the topic of all their energy, but very seldom do people actually ask, well, what is it? And how does it exist? Okay, so asking that question, then we can get into these 20 wrong views and then start to think, well, kind of each view kind of maybe, but no, it doesn't really work. And, it makes us think more and more exactly who the I is. Yeah. And then the mind. So the mind is the I that is the possessor or the owner of the aggregates. Yeah. And everything else in the world that we crave. Yeah. We want to own everything. Or if not own it, we certainly want to control and manage it. Okay. Then the second of the afflictive views is view of the extreme. And that's where we left off last week. So that is on page 81. Have part way down. So the view of extreme is a corrupt intelligence that, referring to the I and the mine apprehended by the view of a personal identity, regards them in either an absolutist or nihilistic manner. Okay, so remember that it's an intelligence because it analyzes its object, can discriminate its object and analyze it. And it is corrupt because it comes up with the wrong conclusion. Yeah, it's like way off. And so it refers to the I and mine that are apprehended by the view of the personality, personal identity. Okay, so it's looking at because the I and mine apprehended by the view of the personal identity would be the inherently existent I and mine, okay, and regards them in either an absolutist or nihilistic manner. So absolutist is when we grasp at inherent existence. It's sometimes called the view of superimposition because the mind is superimposing inherent or true existence on a conventionally existent object. Okay? So sometimes it's called the extreme of superimposition. Sometimes the extreme of permanence, because that I would have to be, if it were inherently existent, would have to be permanent. Okay, sometimes it's called the view of existence. And here it doesn't mean just existence, it means inherent existence. Okay, so it's called view of the, the absolutist view, or the view of absolutism, because it reifies the I, it makes it some kind of absolute concrete entity. Yeah. So it regards it in either an absolutist manner or a nihilistic manner. So a nihilistic manner is denying something that does exist. So there's different kinds of nihilism. We can, for example, deny that the I and the mind exist at all and say there's no person. Okay. When you do the meditation looking for who the I is, sometimes when you come up with nothing, then your mind just says, well, I just don't exist at all. Yeah. And sometimes it is negating an I that, or nihilism, I should say in general, is negating that our actions have any kind of, what's the word, ethical dimension to them. Okay. So absolutism is superimposing a kind of existence that isn't there. Nihilism is denying a kind of existence that does exist. Okay. And those are the two extremes. You can see how they look like they're polar opposite. But what's really interesting is when you start to examine how does the I exist, you find that both the absolutist view and the nihilist view, they stem basically from the same error. Yeah. And that error is when you're analyzing to try and find the I or the self or the me, and you can't find it. Yeah. Or when you're analyzing first, okay? And then you find something, okay? And you say, that's me. That's who I am. My body's me. My mental consciousness is me. Yeah. Or my feelings are me. My thoughts are me. You come up with something that you can grasp onto, that who you think you are. Or you just come up with just this idea of some kind of I that exists on its own. Actually, grasping one of the aggregates as me isn't the actual absolutist view. It's more coming up with thinking that there's a real, true, independent me. Yeah, that doesn't depend on anything else. No causes and condition, no parts, nothing like that. That's what the absolutist view is. Not the thinking that it's one aggregate or another. I got confused for a minute. The nihilistic view says, there's just no I whatsoever. The thing that they're based on is they're both have the assumption that there's a real, true, independent I. Okay? And if there's no independent I, then the I doesn't exist at all. Okay? So then these people have this either or in their mind. Either the I has got to be independent or it doesn't exist at all. Yeah. So then when they analyze and they wind up kind of in this area, then the absolutists say, well, there's a real I that's there, that's independent. Otherwise, because if there weren't a real I, then there wouldn't be an I at all, and then we're in real trouble. We can't deny the existence of the self. So there's got to be a real, inherently existent self. The nihilists come to that same point, yeah, and they say too, oh, well, but if it's not reified, if there's not an independent I, then the only conclusion is there's no person. So both of the sides are based on this thing of there's got to be an independent person or else there's no person at all. Okay, so both of them do not have any idea about a merely designated I. Yeah, both the absolutist and the nihilist cannot fathom that the person exists by mere imputation. Okay, so one goes to one extreme and the other one goes to the other extreme, but they're both based on that same either or. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so based on grasping the I as inherently existent, the view of the extremes holds either one, an absolutist perspective that the I exists as an eternal, immutable soul or self that continues in future lives. Yeah. So this is how it's seen in common with all the Buddhist views. You know, for the Prasangika, it would be an inherently existent self. So it based on grasping either that or a nihilistic outlook that the I becomes totally non-existent after death, there being no continuum of the mere I in future lives. Okay, so this view is really thinking of the I, not just in this life, but as, you know, something that goes from life to life, because you've got to have something that carries the karma. So the absolutist view says, okay, it's an eternal, immutable soul or self that exists from one lifetime to the next, and that's what carries the karma. And the nihilists say, there's no person, there's no continuity. When you die, there's nothing. Yeah, you just cease to exist. Your body gets recycled, your mind stream stops, you know, and there's no rebirth, so there's nothing that has to carry the karma. Okay, you can see this view of the extremes is quite alive and well in our day and age, because in society we see many people who talk about an immutable soul that is the essence of who they are. And then you find other people, maybe some scientists or whatever, who just say, you know, we are the body. There's only the material things that exist. And when we die, even when the body is dead, it ceases and there's nothing else that can possibly continue on to the next life. Yeah, because the mind is just an emergent property of the body, and when the body ceases, the mind does too. Okay, so you know, these views that are being talked about aren't some kind of weird thing that only people in ivory towers or, you know, think about. These are views or that only people in ancient times thought about. These are views that people nowadays have. Yeah. And in your life, I don't know about you, but I've thought of the self, the I, in both of those ways. Yeah. I was raised that there's a soul, and I believed that for a while. Then I couldn't believe, you know, I had doubts about the whole idea of creation. So then I said, well, you know, after you die, there's nothing that exists. So they say between those two views, the nihilistic view is the worst, because the nihilistic view, if you think there's no future life, there's no I that continues, then that gives us license to behave any way we want, because there's no karma, so there's no effects of our karma. Okay, so the nihilistic view is considered the most harmful because at least if you believe in a truly existent self or soul, or you think that the I was created by some supreme being, that at least those religions give you some kind of ethical code to live by. And they encourage love and compassion and so on. So they say, if you're going to go to two extremes, better to avoid both, but really don't go to the nihilistic one. Yeah. And you can see why, the people say, well, when you die, there's nothing, so why not do what I want? Because it doesn't matter anyway. Yeah. Because everything's going to go out of existence. There's no continuum of anything. So in the end, it doesn't really matter. So do what you want. And that gives rise to a very hedonistic view. Whereas if at least somebody believes in a soul, it's the wrong view. But they may think, oh, well, but, I want my soul to go to heaven. I don't want it to go to hell. So I will keep good ethical conduct because of that. Yeah. View of the extremes prevents us from finding the middle way view, free from the two extremes of absolutism and nihilism. Okay, so this is how it functions. It prevents us from finding the correct view. It also causes us to neglect creating the virtuous causes for higher rebirth and liberation, especially if we have the nihilistic view, because we don't even believe in higher rebirth and liberation. So why, exert ourselves to create good karma for things that don't even exist, And so the nihilistic or hedonistic people often say, well, religion is the opiate of the people. It's a way to control people. Yeah, you threaten them with hell and you reward them with heaven, and by that means you control them. Okay, so then they say, well, we're not going to do that because that's all corrupt. And so, but then people are left with very little, in terms of ethical guidance. And, people say, well, I do what is right. What about just people who do what's right because it's right? Yes, there are those people, and they may not have any kind of religion or whatever, but they have some kind of a moral conscience, and that's fantastic. But if we look around, let alone the people who don't believe anything, how do the people who believe in God and heaven and hell act? Do they keep good ethical conduct? A few of them do. Our friends, the Catholic sisters, are incredible people. But look at everybody else we read about in the newspaper. Yeah? So, yeah, difficult. Okay, so the absolutist view is also called the view of existence, which means inherent existence. Eternalism, okay? Eternalism because you're thinking of a person that is permanent and eternal and lasts forever. What is our footnote here? Okay, so eternalism in Buddhist philosophy is not the same as the eternalism that is a philosophy of time. So I don't know what that eternalism is, but it's not this one. Okay, so it's also called the view of superimposition, the view of permanence, because it projects a false mode of existence on the person. The nihilistic view is called the view of non-existence. Okay, the view of annihilation or the view of deprecation, because it denies the continuity of the self that actually does exist. Okay, so in doing so, the nihilistic view negates future rebirth as well as the possibility of liberation and awakening. Yeah, so then, you know, why follow the path if there's no result? So the Buddha spoke of this view, saying its holders think, it may not be for me. I shall not be. It will not be for me. Okay? So I may not exist in my next life. It may not be for me, any kind of karma ripening, result coming. Probably not. I shall not be, so there's no me to start with, and it will not be for me, so there's no I that will experience the result. Yeah, so this kind of way of thinking. Yeah, and we can see also in society how destructive the nihilistic view is, because so many people who suicide have that view, you know, and they just feel this life is, you know, it's not worth anything, it's just suffering, there's no future life, there's nothing, there's no hope for anything, so, you know, might as well die. Which is very, very sad from a Buddhist viewpoint. One of the inmates that I correspond with, he told me that at some point when he was incarcerated, he was quite nihilistic and very depressed. Yeah, very depressed. My life is worthless. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing to look forward to. There's no future life, so why should I try and do anything? You know, just dying will put an end to my suffering. And so he thought to suicide. And then he told me when he thought, because he had just started learning Buddhism, and then when he thought that, oh, wait a minute, I might be reborn, then he decided not to kill himself, because he realized that even if you kill yourself, you're not stopping your dukkha. Yeah, because there's a continuity into the next life, and you're born again, and, you know, the dukkha's not gonna, your suffering's not gonna go away like that. And so he really began to practice quite well. I think that's amazing kind of transformation to happen to somebody who's incarcerated. Yeah. By identifying the view of extremes as erroneous, the Buddha clarified that although there is no inherently existent person, a conventionally existent person, the mere I, that is reborn and can attain liberation, exists. Okay, so such an I does exist. When we talk of the middle way, free from the two extremes, sometimes we get the imagination that absolutism is here and nihilism is here. You put them together, cut them in half so that they're averaged, and that's the middle way view. Okay, so it's half nihilistic and half eternalistic, so it's the middle way view. No, okay, the middle way view is not halfway between those two. It's completely apart and separate, okay? It's not, half and half, because it denies both of those wrong views, you know? It says, yes, there's an I that exists, So it contradicts nihilism. And it says, but that I is not inherently existent. So it contradicts absolutism. And then it sets forth the I as a dependent arising and the aggregates and everything else as a dependent arising, as something that is mere name. Okay. And so that mere I that exists by being merely designated, that you cannot find when you search for, that's the one that gets reborn and attains awakening. But our mind says, wait a minute, if there's something that goes from this life to that life, it should be something that I can locate. Otherwise, what in the world can go from one life to the other? It's got to be something. Okay. So is it like, a bulletin board and all the karma sticks to it? And this bulletin board that is me goes from one life to the next with all the karma? Is that what it's like? There's got to be something that doesn't change, that is findable when I look for it. Because if I can't find it, how do I know it's there? And if it exists by mere designation, then what's that? That's just airy-fairy. There's nothing there. So what can carry the karma? Okay? So that's the argument that people put forth. Yeah. On the other hand, the people with the middle way view say, well, but if you believe in nihilism, there's nothing that carries the karma, so that's not going to be it. And if you believe in eternalism and you think that there's a permanent I, well, something that is permanent and does not is immutable, that cannot go from one lifetime to the next because that involves change. And you're telling me that the I doesn't change at all. So, the Madhyamaka, the middle way people, refute both the absolutist and the nihilist people. But, when you listen to the views of the absolutists, and, when you're in that mood, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And when you're in the mood of nihilism, it's yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you see that in your mind? Yeah. And can you see how we flip from one to the other? We're so crazy. Okay.
I'm wondering if you would just summarize the difference between the view of the personal I, or the personal self, and the absolutist view of the view of extremes. Because in some way they sound like the same. The view of personal I is apprehending an inherently existent I in one's own continuum. And the absolutist view is also looking at that inherently existent I and saying it's permanent. It seems like...
What? Say that again?
So the view of extreme of absolutism is looking at the I or mind that's apprehended by the view of the personal identity, the inherently existent I, and holding it to be permanent or eternal. Mm-hmm. So how is that different from the view of the personal I? I would think that the view of the personal I does that already.
The view of the personal I does, okay, but this is the view of the extremes. So it's referring to the I and mind apprehended by the view of the personal identity and regards them in either an absolutist or nihilistic manner. Okay?
If it views it in an absolutist manner, how is that different from the view of the personal I?
It's not, but, in that sense, but it's kind of affirming what the view of the personal identity grasps at. And it's saying, yes, that is true. That is a good view. Yeah, that's as much as I can make out. Yeah?
Kind of this question too, but where isn't the view of the personal identity is innate and the rest of these are not? Is that true?
The personal view of the personal identity is innate. Regarding the rest of them, let's see what we come to, because I remember when putting this together, there was a lot of discussion about this and what is, regarding the other four, what is innate, what isn't. I know that, I think we may come to that, okay? The view of rules and practices, that one is definitely only artificial or acquired. Okay, but let's see what we come to. Okay. Yeah, it could be that, but then still, the view of the personal identity has acquired and innate. Yeah. Okay, so then the third view is a view holding erroneous views as supreme. So you not only have wrong views, and actually all these others, although they're all called afflicted views, they're all basically wrong views too, even though wrong views is one of the 5. Okay, so this one, view holding the erroneous view as supreme, is you have a wrong view and you say, it's fantastic, this is the right view. Okay, so the view holding wrong views as supreme is a corrupt intelligence that regards the view of a personal identity, the first one, a view of extremes, the second one, or wrong views, the 5th one, as correct and supreme views, there being no higher views. Okay, so this, in a way, is somehow related to that kind of arrogance that thinks our wrong views are good views. It's not the same, but you can see, they're kind of companions. So the view holding erroneous views as supreme also views our own 5 aggregates as supreme, thinking there is no better body, feelings, and so forth. Okay, so you can see it is related to, what's I and mine is better, and the views of I and mine are the best. We ordinary beings easily become attached to our views, and the view holding wrong views as supreme functions to increase our attachment to erroneous views, so that we arrogantly tout our wrong views as right ones. And we meet these people sometimes, you can meet them and they are sure, and they are spouting some, up in Mars philosophy that may boil down to absolutism or nihilism. Very often they boil down to those two. And then they tout their wrong views as right ones. They accumulate a group of followers, and that is disastrous, because that person who does that creates a lot of negative karma, and the people that follow that person, what gets imprinted in their mind again and again is the wrong view. Yeah. And then if somebody tries to present the right view, they say, oh, that's wrong, I don't believe that. Yeah. Or they have such loyalty for their teacher that they won't even, listen to any other views. Nagarjuna talks about this, remember? Yeah, in Precious Garland. That book, Precious Garland, is so amazing. Yeah, it's just an incredible book. Okay. So we ordinary beings easily become attached to our views. I believe I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I believe, it's not the big lie, it's the big steal. Yeah, we get so attached to our views. Okay, and the view holding wrong views as supreme functions to increase our attachment to those erroneous views. So we arrogantly tout our wrong views as right ones. Holding wrong views as supreme strongly holds to wrong views, okay, and serves as the basis for generating wrong views in this and future lives. Okay, so if you have wrong views this life and you view them as supreme, you're setting yourself up for having wrong views in future lives. It makes our mind very narrow and decreases our intelligence. And it makes us, very narrow and stubborn. And stubborn without any good reason. Or with a bunch of bad reasons. Okay. While wrong views can be abandoned comparatively easily, when we hold them as supreme, they become deeply entrenched in our mind and thus more difficult to overcome. The 4 distorted conceptions regarding true dukkha correspond with the first 3 afflictive views. Okay, so viewing that which lacks a self as having one is the view of a personal identity. Viewing the impermanent as permanent is the absolutist or eternalistic view. Viewing the foul body as clean and viewing what is in nature unsatisfactory as pleasurable are the view holding erroneous views as supreme. Okay, so they love making correlations between these kinds of things. Yeah. I hold that, chocolate is pleasurable inherently. Don't try to change my mind. So that's holding wrong views as supreme. Yeah.
So I'm struggling a little bit with this one in terms of imagining someone who follows a religion that believes in a soul. It's hard for me to imagine that person holding that view, that absolutist view, without holding that view as extreme. Does that make sense? In my mind, it would almost always be the case that someone holds their wrong views as supreme.
Yes, I would think so. Yeah. And, what you see here is you have one afflictive view that creates another afflictive view. Yeah. You hold, that there's a permanent soul. And then, of course, yes, my view is supreme because I wouldn't believe anything wrong. Right? And because my teacher said so, and they promised that if I believe like this, I will make a lot of money and have a happy life. Yeah, prosperity gospel. Okay? So
I know lots of people who kind of hold this idea of a soul, but don't have a really strong conviction. Like they wouldn't go so far as to fight to the death for it. It's just the way they've always thought. They've never thought about it very much. So I don't think it necessarily follows that
They may hold it very tightly, but just because they don't fight to the death for it doesn't mean that they don't hold it tightly.
Yes, but what I'm saying, maybe this isn't true, but what I'm saying is that I don't think it necessarily means that they would also hold it as supreme. They're just lazy about they never thought much about what they learned, and that's the end of it. You think?
I don't know.
Okay.
You have to ask those people what they think. I have no idea. Okay, then the fourth one is view of rules and practices. So the view holding bad rules and practices as supreme is another corrupt intelligence that believes purification of mental defilements is possible by ascetic practice and inferior ethical codes that are inspired by erroneous views. Okay, so for example, the people who do animal sacrifice and think that by sacrificing animals, this is a wrong view, but it's also a view of rules and practices. They think that will prevent bad things from happening, or it will, there used to be in ancient India, if you walk across fire, it can bring liberation. If you jump on a trident and this middle spoke comes out your crown, then you will achieve liberation. So, it has a set of wrong ethics, okay? And it has wrong precepts, like the Buddha had, like Angulimala's teacher, who told him to go out and kill 1,000 people and bring back a necklace made of their finger bones, okay? So he was definitely holding wrong rules as supreme, okay? That this was a precept that you had to do. And wrong practices is supreme. So, you can look what people do. It's usually explained in more of a Indian context, like, or maybe it'll come. Yeah, it comes and it describes some of them here. Okay, so this view functions to cause us to engage in useless actions that make us exhausted but bring no spiritual benefit. Okay, like engaging in ascetic practices, which again is very popular in some religions. And certainly in India, the whole idea was, and to some extent in Catholicism, if you torment the body, that's how you will overcome attachment to the body. So, it encourages, ascetic practices and, doing all sorts of things, sitting in icy cold water, or beating yourself, self-flagellation, or, whatever, these kinds of things. But it doesn't bring any spiritual benefit. Yeah. Okay, so the view of rules and practices thinks that what are not causes for higher rebirth and liberation are causes for them, and what is not the path to liberation is the path. Okay. Under its influence, people engage in non-virtue, believing it to be virtue. And they follow a path that they believe will lead to liberation, that leads instead to unfortunate rebirths. Examples of this erroneous view include thinking that killing in the name of one's religion will bring rebirth in a heavenly realm. Many people have that view nowadays, don't they? if you kill to defend your religion, if you kill all the heathens and non-believers, that is a virtuous action. Okay? Or that animal sacrifice pleases the gods, and brings good fortune. Every autumn in Nepal, they do a huge animal sacrifice. Huge. And it's just this horrible feeling, because they kill big animals and small animals, and yeah. And they think it is the cause for good fortune. Yeah. You offer the animal lives to the gods. Yeah, but what kind of god is it who would like killing, Okay. In Asia too, they do this. Yeah, and some of the ancestor worship practices. Yeah, you make animal sacrifices and give it to the gods. Yeah, or no, to your ancestors. Yeah, to your ancestors. When I first went to Singapore, it was in the 7th month, and I had no idea what the 7th lunar month meant, in Singapore. And to people who were nominally Buddhist, but didn't know much about Buddhists, they were practicing a form of ancestor worship. And many of the Buddhist temples went along with this, because that way people came to the temple and maybe they got some Buddhism mixed in with their other kind of beliefs. But I got there and I was staying in a temple, and I went in to pay my respects to the Buddha, and the hall was filled with tables, like you were having a luncheon, and chairs, and who was seated in the chairs, but effigies, the size of human beings. And what was placed in front of them were meals that their relatives brought to offer to their deceased ancestors. And it was how to show respect and love and care for your ancestors. The idea was also that they could take the food with them, or take the essence of the food with them and store it for a while and eat it. So they took the essence, but actually the people who offered the food wound up eating it. So they usually made it quite tasty. And yeah. And then there were, so I was really shocked, and then I learned, this is a practice of ancestor worship. But then what the Buddhists did in China is, I think it was Shariputra, one of the arhats, said, no, instead of doing like this for your ancestors, you should create merit and dedicate for them. Okay, so then they were trying to get the Buddhists to try and do that rather than these kinds of things. So those kinds of things. I don't know. I mean, in our culture, we have all sorts of ideas too about what is good, and you should try and convert as many people as possible. And if that means, impinging on their time, even though they're not interested, still you're creating virtue by trying to convert them. There's definitely that view here. Okay. Other instances are believing that the perfect performance of a ritual alone, without any mental transformation, is the path to liberation. So this was very much a Brahmanist thing, that you have to perform the ritual perfectly. You have to say all the syllables correctly. You have to do all the physical movements correctly, all this kind of stuff. Okay. You can find in Buddhism certain hints of these kind of Indian Brahminical things. Yeah. When we're told about, how to repeat something, how to say something at the end of pujas, how we apologize for doing the puja incorrectly. Sometimes in Tantra, the way it's very specific about how you have to set something up or how you decorate it or whatever. Do you want to add something? Oh, yeah. In Kriya Tantra, there's a lot of rituals, washing rituals and things like that. Yeah. If you look at it from the outside, it looks like Tantra has a lot of this stuff. The commotion over long life pills that goes on after a long life empowerment. People are crazy, grabbing, stepping over each other to get these long life pills, as if eating this pill will give you a long life. Eating the pill alone will give you a long life. It has nothing to do with your mind getting transformed or thinking of virtue and practicing virtue and that kind of thing. It's just that pill, that substance. I gotta get it, And the same thing with cords, these cords. Wow, when they're handed out, the grabbing that goes on. And I remember one Rinpoche said, you people, what was it he said? You think this cord is going to protect you, but actually you have to protect it because otherwise it gets dirty and it breaks everything. So what are you thinking? How are you thinking that this piece of string is going to protect you? Okay. But, in the Tibetan army, they all wore things, to scare away bullets and stuff like that. So, and initiations, holy water, my goodness, So, what the Hindus do, thinking that drinking water from the Ganges or bathing in the Ganges is going to purify your negativities. How is that different than the Buddhists, running around? I want some blessed water, get out of my way. On the Catholics too? Yeah. Oh yeah, there's the baptism, lots of holy water there too. So, how are these things different? It has to do with your mental state. And if your mental state is thinking that substance alone is going to purify my mind or protect me, and I don't have to do anything, then that is, I would say, pretty similar to this. Yeah. Whereas if you, know how to think, then your thought process can make that physical, whatever it is, into something that transforms your mind. Okay, that negativities can be purified by bathing in or drinking holy water. Oh, wait a minute. Tibetans do that. Not the bathing part, but the drinking part. Yeah. So what's the difference? Yeah. And when we drink the holy water, during initiations or whatever, is our mind paying attention to what our mind is doing? Or are we looking at the external object as doing the spiritual work? Okay. That attachment is abandoned by extreme asceticism. such as fasting for days on end, walking through fire, or lying on a bed of nails. Oh, that last one sounds great. Yeah. And you think that by, subjecting the body to pain that you will conquer attachment to the body. But this is the big thing that the Buddha realized after he went to do ascetic practices for a year, is that it doesn't work. That isn't the way to do it. Although these people aspire for liberation, their aspiration remains unfilled. So that is really sad, because people may put a lot of energy into doing things that really does not bring the spiritual benefit that they think it does. I remember reading Karen Armstrong's book many years ago. She was a British woman, I think, who entered an Episcopalian nunnery, if I'm not mistaken. And Episcopalian is quite similar to Catholicism, except you can get divorced and remarry thanks to Henry VIII. Yeah, I mean, that's why the church split. Yeah, can you imagine that? He threw a whole country into disarray just so he could, get rid of one wife and marry another and have it be, approved of. And, and what he did to all these other people that then started so many wars between the Scots who were Catholics and the British who were, who were Episcopalian, and, my goodness. Okay, so, something to be careful of, these kind of views. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose, if you go to New Age workshops, you'll probably find these kinds of things too.
Crystals.
Or
Crystal, stones have certain kinds.
Oh, yeah. Crystals and stones. Yeah. Whether they say, I don't know if those things are just saying, that they'll bring good luck, or if they really say that you will advance spiritually before, because of them, because there might be some difference there. Mm-hmm.
I think there are many different permutations of that, but way back when I was dabbling in that stuff, the particular kind of stones were part of a spiritual ritual practice for clarity, for purification, for transcendence, and for moving on to some different levels of vibration. So they were definitely part of a spiritual ritual of some sort.
Yeah. Okay, then the fifth one, wrong views. Okay, so wrong views are a corrupt intelligence that denies the existence of something necessary to attain awakening that exists. Okay, so some element that you need that is necessary to attaining liberation or awakening that actually exists, you deny its existence. Okay, so this includes the denial of causes, saying that constructive and destructive actions don't exist. So that, not just not believing in karma, but actually refuting the law of karma and its effects. Denial of effects, believing that the results of constructive and destructive actions don't exist. Denial of functionality, believing that past and future lives are non-existent. And denial of phenomena, asserting liberation, awakening, or the three jewels are non-existent. Okay. So these wrong views center particularly on denying the existence of something that exists. And that something has to be something that's important for you to have confidence in order to make progress on the path. So these views are so damaging because when people hold them, they easily deny ethical responsibility for their actions and justify engaging in many destructive actions. Okay, don't believe in karma, so you do what you want. There's no ethical responsibility. Okay, and there's no result that's going to come from my actions, so, yeah. Wrong views function to harm us because they serve as a basis for engaging in non-virtue, cause us not to engage in virtue, so to be quite, like you learn what is a good thing to practice and then you don't believe it. You say, no, that doesn't work. And wrong views sever our roots of virtue. So remember, one of the ways to destroy our virtue or to inhibit it from ripening, anger and wrong views. Adhering to wrong views cuts our opportunity to attain awakening. In the Supreme Net Sutra, the Brahmajala Sutra, the Buddha spoke of 62 examples of wrong views advanced by various groups. Okay. So the eternalists proclaim the eternity of the self and the world. Yeah, we meet lots of people like that. Okay. Those who are part eternalists and part non-eternalists proclaim the partial eternity and the partial non-eternity of the self and world. The finitists and infinitists proclaim the finitude or infinitude of the world. So again, these same questions that people ask now, yeah, is the universe finite? Is it infinite? Is time finite? Is there an end to the world? Or do things go on forever? Yeah, so these same questions exist now. Yeah, the eel wigglers, yeah, they resort to evasive statements, So it could be like that, or it could be like this, or, so they're like eels that wiggle. The chance originalists proclaim the chance origin of the self and the world. I went to visit one professor at Harvard when I was teaching at a Dharma center there. And I asked him about, what he meant by the mind is an emergent property of the body. And, he was saying, well, there were all these microbes in the water and the amoebas, and then, different things bumped into each other, so it made multi-cell beings, and things kept on bumping into each other more, and then you got plants, and then they kept evolving, and the things mutating, and you got, various animals, and you got monkeys, and somehow out of all of that, these things, mutating, then the mind came out. So that makes an emergent property of the body. So it's kind of like the chance origin of the self and the world, isn't it? So that, if some people start out believing in God that created everything, and then they decide they don't believe in that, it's easy for them to go, well, everything is just one big accident. Yeah, there was no intelligence behind it. There was no plan like that. Okay. So you can see the middle way view isn't there was no plan or there was a divine intelligence behind it. The middle way view is cause and effect. Yeah. depending on our minds. Okay. Then there's those who speculate about the past, having fixed views about the past. Oh, somebody who's stuck in their childhood trauma. Not just that, but views of the past and, this happened in the past, so our ancestors did this, so then we have to follow up on the customs of our ancestors. And, our ancestors were always fought with this other group, so we're always going to fight with them too. Those who claim a doctrine of conscious post-mortem survival. Okay, so that means that the consciousness exists after death. So maybe, I don't know, as a zombie or as some kind of spirit. I don't know the details of these views. Okay, those who proclaim a doctrine of unconscious post-mortem survival. That's going to be harder, everybody's unconscious. Those who proclaim a doctrine of neither consciousness nor unconscious post-mortem survival. Nihilists proclaim the annihilation, destruction, and non-existence of beings. And there are proclaimers of a self that realizes Nirvana here and now, and speculators about the future. Okay, so this past, present, future thing, maybe the past, I lived, everything was perfect, and then, people ate this apple, or the present, you can attain nirvana right now, or the speculators about the future, when the world's going to come to an end and you're going to be judged and so on. And then speculators about the past, the future, or both, and on and on. Okay, so we asked some of the Geshis at IBD about the Tibetans and these views, and they gave us a whole list that we have somewhere. You have it? Yeah. As we can see, just as in modern times, at the Buddha's time too, there are a plethora of views, each claiming to be the one correct truth. The Buddha pinpointed 3 types of nihilistic views as views shunned by the wise because they do not bring liberation. Okay, so first, the nihilistic view denying the continuation of the person after death. Okay, so it's clear how that's going to lead you to liberation because you don't even think there's a future life or liberation. Okay, so that view is often the result of a materialistic outlook on life. In a modern context, it is thinking the mind is an emergent property of the brain. And since the brain ceases to function at death, so do the mind and the person. Since no one will experience the consequences of our actions in a future rebirth, as long as we avoid the authorities in this life, we won't experience any adverse repercussions from our non-virtuous actions, and therefore we can do as we please. And the second is the nihilistic view denying the existence of constructive and destructive actions. So that's the view denying karma and its effects. So it negates ethical distinctions among actions. Killing and torturing others is not destructive, so no unpleasant results of engaging in such actions will follow. Generosity and kindness are not constructive, so there is no use in engaging them. Yeah, so again, no such thing as virtue and non-virtue. So no need to exert yourself to avoid something or to practice something else. And then third is the nihilistic view denying causation holds that there are no causes or conditions for either the defilement or purification of sentient beings. In other words, sentient beings are defiled and purified by either chance or fate. So there is nothing we can do to prevent suffering or attain liberation. Okay, so this would be based on denying cause and effect. And, so there's nothing we can do to improve our existence, and there's no way that we become defiled by negative actions. It's all just either fate or chance. Yeah. So you can really feel the stench of nihilism in these views. They're really such depressing kind of views. Some people may believe in the randomness of happiness and pain because they cannot see the link between causes created in one life bringing effects in the other. Okay, so the second one was just denying the existence of constructive and destructive actions. This one is denying that any actions bring any kind of defiling result or purifying result, happy result or miserable result. Alternatively, these people are fatalistic and believe that everything is controlled by destiny or by the will of the Creator. So again, we find both of these very common in society. Everything is fated, it is planned out, it's destined to happen. This way, whenever people fall in love, it's like, this was destined to happen. Yeah? Like there was, it's quite fatalistic, as if there were some kind of planner of everybody's lives and it was all planned out in advance, something like that. Yeah? Or it's all done by the will of the Creator. So, all these the pandemic is the will of the Creator. If you get COVID and you live or you die, that's the will of the Creator. So many people have that kind of view. And they find it quite comforting. I'm not in charge, I can't control, but there's somebody who's wiser than I am who's making all of this happen. So I don't understand it, but I'll go along because basically I don't have any choice. Yeah. The Buddha did not say these views are wrong because they contradicted his ideas. Yeah, so it wasn't the Buddha. The Buddha was attached to his views, and everything that disagreed with them was wrong and bad and like that. But, he said they were wrong because they are based on misunderstanding, limited knowledge, or distorted thinking, and will lead those who hold them to create the causes for their own future suffering. So the Buddha is not saying that people who hold these views are stupid people, that they can't think straight, that they're somehow inferior to people like him and his followers, or that they, will be punished for their wrong views and stuff. So the Buddha is not criticizing the people who have these views. He's calling these wrong views because they aren't going to fulfill the wishes of the people who hold them. Yeah, and they're just going to lead you to go around and around, So wrong views may be spoken of in two ways. In general, they include all 5 afflictive views. Okay, so a general way of speaking, all 5 are wrong views. But more precisely, they differ, as the 5th one, they differ from the other views because of their object. They negate the existence of past and future lives, the three jewels, and the law of karma and its effects. Okay, so these are three things that if you're going to attain liberation, that it's very important that you have as elements of your worldview that shape your actions and your thoughts and your ways of seeing things. Okay, so these views negate the existence of past and future lives. So it's this life or nothing, you know. They negate the existence of the three jewels. So there's no true path, no true cessation, nothing to practice. And there's no sangha, so there's no realized practitioners that have followed the path to rely on. Okay, they negate the law of karma and its effects, so my actions have no ethical dimension. It's really a desolate view, isn't it? Yeah. When you think of, how if you really study and contemplate these things and have some confidence in them, it really brightens your whole perspective in life. Whereas when you don't, So denying cause and effect is a serious wrong view, the one that cuts the root of virtue. So wrong views in the context of the 10 paths of non-virtue and in the context of the root afflictions differ slightly. Okay, so wrong views is the 10th of the 10 non-virtues. Okay, wrong views is the 5th of the afflictive views, so, which are one of the root afflictions. So the latter, in other words, the wrong views in the context of the root affliction. No, it should be the wrong views in the context of the path of the 10 paths and in the context of the root afflictions differ slightly. The latter is more pervasive in that it includes not only negating what does exist, such as the three jewels and so forth, but also holding what does not exist, such as a creator God or a metaphysical primal substance or universal mind, as the ultimate source of the world and the beings in it. I think it should say the former is more pervasive. Yeah, because wrong views in the context of the root afflictions is denying what doesn't exist. Whereas when we talk about it in terms of the 10 non-virtues, it's also holding things that do not exist as existent. Okay, so we got to be sure and change that. It's a big boo-boo. It's weird, no matter how many people you have read things, and people who know the Dharma, you still find mistakes. Okay, wrong views cut the root of virtue gradually, not all at once. The roots of virtue decrease while the wrong views grow stronger. For example, although Sally practices generosity, her career does not advance. Meanwhile, she sees people who lie around get promoted. Huh? Oh, yeah, lie around. Oh, okay. Well, that too. She sees people who lie get promoted. So you can lie and lie around. Okay. Yeah. So the wrong view arises in her mind that it's useless to create virtue. Okay. And it's better to lie Because if you lie, it stirs people up, and you create a commotion, and maybe you'll get what you want. Slowly, this idea grows, that it's useless to create virtue, so that even if her teacher tries to explain that her hindrances are due to destructive karma from the past, and her present constructive actions will bring agreeable results in the future, she doesn't listen. So she started out creating virtue, then she kind of looked and says, I want instant results for my generosity, but I'm not getting them. But the people who lie, they get promoted and they get good things. So I just don't believe in this karma stuff. Then the teacher tries to explain, well, one of your hindrances why you're not getting promoted and so on has to do with some negative karma and a lack of virtuous karma. So it's good if you purify, it's good if you create merit. But her mind says, yeah, that's all hooey. That's not going to change my situation. So she completely dismisses the law of karma and its effects. Such an entrenched wrong view severs the root of virtue in her mind, destroying the seeds of virtue. So the good karma that she had created in the past gets inhibited from ripening or totally destroyed. Okay, so let's pause here. We'll continue next week. If there's a couple of questions, we can do them.
So someone is asking, what are examples of grasping phenomena? And what is the difference between grasping the personal identity and grasping phenomena?
Okay, grasping phenomena, the most important grasping of phenomena that leads to grasping at a personal identity is grasping at the aggregates, our body and mind, as inherently existent. Because when you grasp the aggregates as inherently existent, since those are the components that make up the self, then you very easily grasp the person as inherently existent.
Someone else is asking, is there an innocent victim in the Buddhist system? Or is that like the child of a barren woman, basically non-existent?
First of all, I would not describe it as innocent or guilty victim, and I wouldn't describe it as a victim to start with. Okay? I wouldn't even use those words, kind of asking that question. I don't know where to go with it because, the Buddhist view differs from those words. First of all, I think rather than describe ourselves as victims, it's better just to see there was a ripening of causes that we created that were unpleasant. Saying people as victims, we have a lot of baggage associated with the word victim. And as soon as we say, I am a victim, you're not, it becomes this whole thing of I was treated unfairly, it's not fair. And it ceases to pertain to one thing in your life. Like when I was in second grade, I got a B on my spelling test and I deserved an A. But all of a sudden, your whole life, you're a victim. And once you have that word and you identify with that word, it traps us. Innocent and guilty, similarly, in Buddhism, we just talk of cause and effect. We're not talking about innocent or guilty. Yeah. When you plant daisies and daisy seeds and you get daisies, the daisies aren't innocent. The daisies aren't guilty. You know, when there's knapweed seeds and the knapweed grows, yeah, the knapweed isn't guilty. The knapweed isn't innocent. It's just, you know, results coming due to the kinds of causes that create them. And I think it's a much healthier psychological view to use those words and that kind of description than to think of ourselves as an innocent victim or a guilty victim.
Someone else asks, out of compassion, should we try to reason with others, i.e. our parents, to transform their wrong views? I may have to talk about it in a non-Buddhist term, like cause and effect rather than karma, or should I just focus on my own Dharma practice and show it rather than try to change other people's view?
Okay. So this question is going to depend a lot on your particular family and your family mechanism. So there's not a one-size-fits-all answer. But definitely your second option of working on yourself and showing it through example, definitely that one should be done. Okay. In terms of trying to reason with your parents, it depends if your parents like that kind of discussion. If they don't and they have their views and they're pretty set in their views, then don't start a family quarrel, you know, by telling them that they're all wrong. However, some people, their parents, when the child gets interested in something, the parents say, well, tell me about what you're thinking. And then you can explain to them what you're thinking, what you're learning. However, if whenever your parents or anybody else, you have the intention of, I am going to change their view, it's not going to work. Yeah. Whenever we come on as, I am going to change your view because you are wrong. If that's going on in our mind, it's going to come out in the way we communicate, and people are going to go, you know, they'll either explode or they'll walk out of the room.
Someone else offers that the Lamrim Chenmo says the wrong view of the root afflictions includes holding a primal essence as the cause of a sentient being. So they don't think that there's a mistake in the book.
Say that again. The Lamrim Chenmo
says wrong view of the root affliction includes holding the essence as the cause of a sentient being. So they don't think that there's any mistake. But I think
let's check the Lamrim and we'll see how it's worded.
And someone else asks, is the conventional I the dependently exist? Sorry, let me start again. The conventional I is the dependently existent empty I, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So things can be empty and they exist conventionally at the same time. Okay. So think about it. See if you have any wrong views or view hanging around here and there. Yeah, look at your life and what you've learned and what you believed in the past. Look at this whole thing about wrong ethical conduct as supreme and wrong practices as supreme. Think about that one. Yeah. I mean, all of these. And of course, our old friend view of the personal identity. That's the big one to look at. Okay. So answers to the questions. First of all, Venerable Sepal's question about the difference between view of the personal identity and extreme views. Okay, so view of a personal identity regards the mere I and grasps it as inherently existent. Extreme view looks at the inherently existent I, which of course doesn't exist, but which it thinks it exists. Okay. And then in this case, the two extremes are either thinking that that inherently existent I is eternal and never ceases. So it's like a soul that carries the karma and goes from one life to life indefinitely into the future, or that that inherently existent I at the time of death ceases completely. Yeah, and that's the view of nihilism. So that's so you can see there the difference between the those two views. Okay, then regarding wrong view as one of the 10 non-virtues and wrong view as one of the 5 afflictive views, which is one of the 6 root afflictions. Okay, regarding that, the wrong view in the 10 non-virtues is, my writing is, okay, so the wrong view in the 10 non-virtues is pretty much what I described last night. The object is existent phenomena, and the wrong view is denying their existence. And here the existent phenomena are things such as rebirth, the law of cause and effect, the existence of the 3 jewels, these kinds of things that are important for spiritual progress. So denying those. So that's the wrong view. That is one of the 10 non-virtues. Then the wrong view, that is the afflictive view, is more expansive. Okay? And that one could be either the object could be things that exist, like the wrong view, that's the 10 non-virtue, and again denying their existence, again of the triple gem and cause and effect and so on. Or it could superimpose or make up views or believe in incorrect views. In other words, asserting things that do not exist to be existent, such as a creator God, such as predetermination, something like that. Okay? So, yeah. So the one that is the wrong view can either be denying what exists or trying to posit what doesn't exist. Whereas the one that is the wrong view is denying the existence of those important things. Okay?